Eventually, death comes for all of us, but exactly where and when you'll meet the Reaper is usually a mystery. Sometimes it can strike you down in your prime with no warning or obvious reason. Other times, people face the most dangerous and terrifying experiences, and through luck and courage, go on to live another day. Coming up are 10 of the most incredible real-life stories of people who stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. Number 10. The Bishop Lives On. This person survived death not once, not twice, but 5 times. Shlomo Vardouni is the Bishop of Baghdad, Iraq, a war-torn country ranked the second most dangerous place in the world for Christians to live after North Korea. In his first brush with death in 2006, Bishop Vardouni was held up at gunpoint in his car, but managed to escape. He lost control of his vehicle, but managed to avoid crashing, somehow surviving. On another occasion a few years later, he was waiting in traffic when a car bomb exploded behind him, the shockwave lifting him up into the air. Miraculously, he wasn't harmed, and then survived another bomb attack while he was eating his lunch. On another occasion, his car was strafed with machine gun fire, as nervous security forces mistook him for a terrorist. He survived by curling up in the footwell of his vehicle until a group of Iraqi Muslims came to his aid and took him to safety. Despite the violence, the Bishop of Baghdad refused to leave the country and has continued to serve his community through 15 years of war and persecution. For him and so many others, death became a normal part of life since the US invaded in 2003 and threw the country into chaos. For Bishop Vardouni, the reason for his survival is clear. God has given him a job to do, and he intends to do it. Number 9. Plane crash survival. On Christmas Eve in 1971, a flight heading from Lima, Peru towards the city of Pucallpa was struck by lightning and plummeted towards the ground. All but one of the passengers died in the crash. The sole survivor was 17-year-old Julianne Kopke, who had fallen 10,000 feet into the Peruvian rainforest. As she regained consciousness, she first became aware of her injuries. Gashes all over her body and a concussion, and then the awful realization that she was alone in the jungle, with her mother who she had been traveling with nowhere to be seen. Incredibly, she spent the next 11 days fighting for her life and crawling through the jungle in search of help. Her survival was thanks to a nearby stream where she found water and scraps of food she found in the luggage of dead passengers. Remembering what her father had told her, she followed the water downstream in the hope of finding civilization. But as the days went on, she became weaker and began to lose hope of rescue. It was only when she had accepted death that she finally stumbled across a group of missionaries who saved her. Number 8. The Nail of Death. Imagine feeling as though every heartbeat brought you closer to death. Doug Bergeson didn't have to imagine, as one day when he was doing a bit of DIY, he had an unexpected meeting with the Reaper. His wife was out, and he was working on restructuring the fireplace using a nail gun to attach the framing. But one quick slip-up sent the nail ricocheting off the fireplace straight into his chest, hitting his heart but missing a major artery by 1/16 of an inch. He felt the nail move with his heartbeat before he'd even realized what had happened. Before panic set in, Doug coolly assessed the situation and decided it would be quickest to drive himself 15 miles to the hospital without pulling out the nail. Luckily for him, this was the right call, and the hospital staff were able to remove the nail and repair the damage. They were amazed at how calm Doug stayed throughout this incredibly close call, showing that it's possible to not only stare death in the face, but to do so and not even blink. Number 7. The Imaginary Armed Robbery. Having your business robbed is a terrifying experience, and there's no way of knowing how you'd react when it happens. But this next survivor hatched the perfect plan, as he was faced with a situation that could have ended up very differently. Saeed Ahmed works at an Egyptian-style kebab restaurant in New Zealand, and was just finishing up his evening's work one night when a would-be armed robber entered the store. It was nearly closing time, and Ahmed was on his own as the masked man approached him, pulled out a gun, and demanded he hand over his day's takings. But rather than panic, Ahmed continued preparing food for customers and serving them, completely ignoring the robber. A customer even walked up to the counter, stepping around the gunman to grab his food. Amazingly, the shopkeeper didn't even acknowledge the situation and just walked to the back of the restaurant to call the police, at which time the confused gunman ran for it. It was a high-stakes gamble, but it paid off, and Ahmed is now well known in his town as a hero. Number 6. George Orwell's War. Many people know George Orwell as the author of the dystopian novels 1984 and Animal Farm, but few know that he served as a journalist in the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War was waged between 1936 and 1939 and pitched a coalition of anarchists, communists, and leftists against the fascist army of General Franco. Orwell spent time on the battlefield documenting and writing about turning points in the war, as well as fighting alongside the anarchists. During his time spent on the battlefield, he was shot twice, once in the throat, a wound so severe he didn't expect to survive, let alone talk again. His second brush with death came later in the conflict as the communists turned on their old anarchist comrades. Orwell and his wife Eileen managed to escape Spain at the last possible moment, a decision that no doubt saved their lives. After this, he decided he needed a change in career and settled into life as a writer. Well deserved in my opinion. Number 5. Sully Sullenberger. This next death defier not only cheated his own demise, but saved 155 people and became a household name in the process. On January 15, 2009, Sully took off from New York City's LaGuardia Airport on a routine flight to Charlotte, North Carolina. As the plane was ascending, a flock of geese was sucked into the jet engines, resulting in a catastrophic and total loss of engine power. As Sully assessed the situation, he realized he wouldn't have time to return to LaGuardia or make it to any of the neighboring airports without crashing into a building and killing many, many more people. As the plane's altitude dropped, Sully made the unprecedented decision to land in the Hudson River. The passengers feared for their lives as the plane made an emergency landing on the surface of the water, just off Midtown Manhattan. Thankfully, the plane stayed afloat long enough for passengers to escape onto the wings before being rescued. Thanks to Sully's heroic decision-making and flying skills, he managed to save the lives of everyone on board. He was even played by Tom Hanks in a hit Hollywood movie made about his dramatic survival story. Number 4. The Final Frontier. Imagine a world without Star Trek. Well, this alternate dimension almost merged with ours if it hadn't been for the vision of Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry. Not many people know this, but Roddenberry used to be in the United States Air Force, and in 1947 was working as the third officer on a commercial flight from Karachi in Pakistan to Istanbul, Turkey. The flight, Pan Am 121, ran into difficulty over the Syrian desert, and one of the engines caught fire. The plane dropped from the sky and crashed, killing 15 people. Roddenberry survived and pulled the dead and injured from the burning aircraft. Alone, wounded, and lost in the desert, the remaining crew and passengers were in an impossible situation, and the death toll would have certainly increased had it not been for the Star Trek creator's good eyesight and determination to survive. Far off in the distance, Roddenberry saw a tiny light, so small nobody else had noticed it. With the help of some other survivors, he led the group to the light's source, which turned out to be a Syrian military base, where they found help. Shortly after the disaster, he quit his flying job to pursue his dream of writing, and to boldly go where no man has gone before. Number 3. Surviving twice in a day. Surviving one major accident is astonishing, but what about 2? For Robert Evans, one day in September 2008 will always be remembered as both lucky and incredibly unfortunate. Robert Evans was homeless and slept under the stars in Boulder, Colorado. One morning while riding his bike, he was the victim of a hit-and-run attack at a busy junction. He was rushed to the hospital and was looked over by doctors, who all agreed he was in remarkably good condition considering he'd just been hit by a car. Upon discharge, Evans was cycling back to his camp when he decided to take a shortcut across a bridge. Seeing the Santa Fe coal train approaching, Evans made the mistake of thinking he had enough time to quickly cross the bridge before the train. This was a costly error, and the train was going faster than he thought, striking Evans and sending him flying off the bridge and into a nearby creek. But again, Evans survived. Police later reprimanded him for trespassing on the bridge, as it wasn't intended for pedestrian use. But I think it's fair to say he earned his new status as a local celebrity. Number 2. Escaping a boulder's path. From the town in Colorado to a very different kind of boulder, this time in the sleepy Italian countryside. It had been a day like any other for the inhabitants of a 300-year-old farm in the hills of northern Italy. But on that night in 2014, 2 giant boulders, approximately 4,000 cubic meters of rock, became dislodged from the hill behind the farm and rolled at high speeds towards the homestead and its sleeping occupants. As they rolled down the massive cliff, they smashed through everything in their path, with the first boulder narrowly missing the main building and completely destroying the adjacent barn. But the second boulder came even closer to causing a tragedy as it headed directly towards the building. Miraculously, the rock slowed and ultimately stopped, mere inches away from the farmhouse. The home is owned by the Catholic Church and houses multiple members of the religious Servite order. Although there's been speculation a rockfall could happen again, it's hard to argue that God wasn't on their side that night. Number 1. Tsunami at sea. Tsunamis are one of nature's deadliest events, and they can devastate huge areas of land with little warning, and unless there's high ground very nearby, there's often no escape. Tsunamis are caused by earthquakes under the sea, which cause a section of the seafloor to suddenly jolt upwards. Underwater movements cause a huge wave on the surface, which in turn begins to move across the ocean towards any country unlucky enough to be in its path. Most often, tsunamis affect Asian nations like Indonesia and Japan, both of which have lost many tens of thousands of people to tsunamis since 2004. This rippling chain reaction can create skyscraper-high walls of water that speed up as they reach shallower waters near land. As they're so fast-moving, they're incredibly hard to predict and can wipe out an entire town or island in a matter of minutes. Now imagine being at sea and encountering a tsunami. Well, the only thing you can do is point your ship directly at the beast and just hope for the best. And that's exactly what the crew of this Japanese Coast Guard vessel did during the Tohoku tsunami of 2011. These men were lucky they were in such a large boat that allowed them to roll over the wave, as had they been in a smaller vessel, the outcome could have been very different. So, which of these near misses do you think is the most impressive? Have you been in one yourself? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.